Sorry for this problem, technical problem. Uh, Thank you for being part of this session. Today with me, with Edon, CTO of FRAKTON, Nesar, Frontend developer at d.labs, and Freskim from Tenton. We are going to talk about the Frontend state in Balkan region. We're gonna play a video about the topic, and then we're gonna discuss about the finding of this survey that we did.
What is the state of front-end development in the Balkan countries? What are the most used frameworks? What is the future of this field and how do we keep going? 500 developers from different Balkan countries answered a lot more questions. They shared their experience, knowledge, and perspectives on what the now and future holds for front-end development. The official report with survey results and experts' comments is now available. Visit Kutia.net and get updated. It was time to put the Balkan developers in the spotlight.
In the first slide, we have a general information about the survey that we did. From the country of the Balkan region, 66% of participants was from Kosovo, 10% from Albania, 9% for Serbia, and 7% from North Macedonia. We asked a question: how long they are being in the front-end game, and 60% of the participants was more than 1 year, 20% few months, and 12% more than three years. Also, we asked about how they describe their seniority. 50% of the participants say they are junior developers. 26% of them say that they are mid. 10% of them say they are senior developers. We categorize the question on different categories. The first of category is the framework that we would like to discuss today with Edon, Nesar, and Freskim. As we see on the first question that we ask about the frameworks, what is the last, or what are the frameworks that are working on the last year? The React took the more percent than Angular, Vue. So maybe we can go to a question with Edon to ask, well, why Edon you think that React is getting more popular? It is because of the market jobs? Is because it's easy to work? Or what is your thought about this trend of the React?
Hello. Before I answer, I am Edon Sekiraqa, CTO of FRAKTON, part of Carta. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you all for joining this session. First, I think the questionnaire was a very good one, and some tricky questions at some points. Regarding the precise question why React is so popular, I think first, it is a good framework. Second, there were many technical guys writing blogs why they should use React, and as you could see, there are plenty of young people answering this questionnaire, and most of the new young people always get influenced from more senior people, or at least from specific blogs. Lately, in our company, we are also using heavily React, not because people knew it at the best, but because we saw that we can solve many complex problems also with React. And it is very easy to, let's say, to deploy or to learn. You have very good documentation about React and very good community where you can find help. But I don't know if I'm allowed to talk also for Angular. For example, last year we had more requests from the clients to work project with Angular. It seems it was popular at that time. But with the time, Angular was a bit switched off from the scene, and now it's mostly used only probably for enterprise projects, but I'm not so sure when I say this. And sometimes it was also used for more complex projects. But when I consider some of projects that we have delivered, which have a quite good complexity, we were managed to have it with React as well. I will keep it short for now, so maybe we can continue in the same topic again. So.
Yeah, maybe we can continue with the Nesar. Nesar, what do you think about the Vue? I think the Vue is most easily from those frameworks to start learning because of it's more intuitive as a framework. And maybe regarding the Angular, it's because you need to know the Angular way. It's more learning curve, more complex, and it's something that usually only an enterprise project is recommended to use. Or what are your thoughts about this?
Thank you for inviting me. And yeah, I'm Nesar, front-end developer, and I'll try to give my perspective from the technical side. So I don't give it from the business side, so I'll do it on the other side of the spectrum. Yeah, so a couple of years ago, when I first started to work with frameworks, my first framework that I worked with was Vue.js with version 2 at that time. And yeah, the learning curve of it is very, very easy, and it's very friendly in terms of beginner friendly. But at that time, after doing a very small project like a survey, then in the next one I started using React just to see what's the best of each of them. And for the Vue, I could say that at that time from Vue 2, it has some very nice way of working, but it was mainly based from the Angular ecosystem, and it was kind of trying to take the best from it and leave the bad side out of it. And yeah, so my main experience is with these two, but with React for the couple of years now it's been my go-to framework. And because it's simplicity on how it works, we can argue that it isn't a framework, it's just a library that makes it an easy way just to create components, but its ecosystem makes it very scalable because it offers a different way of implementation. Basically, whatever you want for it, probably there's a package for React. But now, in the last month or two, I've started to work again with Vue. It's in another project, but now it's with the Vue 3. So now I have a new perspective of how Vue works as well. And it's a very nice change compared to the Vue 2. Because now how I see it is that Vue 3 takes the best from Angular, but also from React, and leave the bad parts, let's say, from these two frameworks out of it. But the disadvantage in the technical side, I would say, is just that the community or the ecosystem is not that rich yet, but it's very promising, and I've watched a couple of courses and tutorials on how it works in Deep Dive from Even You. It was the course, and I better understand it, and it's a very nice and lightweight framework. Yeah, maybe we'll jump into the next question. What's about the other one?
Freskim, in question that we ask, what is that you will keep learning? Also, React take the most percent. What about your thought about this? Is the React will continue to get the trend and to be even more popular, or Vue with the Vue 3 will take some of the popularity?
Hello, I'm Freskim, I'm from Tenton. I'm full stack developer that. I really think that React has a big community, and I really think that React will be the most popular JavaScript framework. Even though that Vue 3 is released and is very fast nowadays, also it supports composition API, I really think that React for 2 or 3 years will be the most popular and most used framework. Maybe one of the most reasons why we use React and also Vue is because with them we can make solution very easy for the big problems. Maybe I would like also to learn Svelte. I've seen that this year, and people are using it, especially people who need to change something in JavaScript framework to learn something new. They are using it a lot. Also, Ember.js has a big community. There are many companies that are supporting it, like Netflix, Microsoft, and also LinkedIn.
Thank you. Regarding the state management, we see that React Context API take the more response and compared to the Redux. What maybe Nesar, you, because you are more in hands-on in the React and you have experience both in Redux and Context API, do you think that React Context API will take more popularity regarding the state management? And is the Redux, let's say, deprecated as state management?
Yeah. So with the introduction of React hooks and functional components that were from React in 2019, I guess, and it really changed the way that the state management is done in React. Before that, it was mainly done from Redux because it was easier to communicate between class components and such. But with that addition of React hooks and also the React Context API, it really introduced a new way on handling and communicating between components, and it's very flexible in the way that it can be split. So based on the context that you have, let's say you have something that is related with the authorization of the user, you can have a context for it. But in practice, let's say when, take an example, is when, let's say we had like a form that is linked with a model and could be like very specific, you can create a custom context for it. Similar to how Redux does it, but actually Redux Toolkit, which is the way that Redux maybe can survive its name or continue to be used. Yeah, so React hooks and React context is pretty my go-to, but the reason that I don't really use Redux when it comes to functional components is that because with the React hooks, there were a lot of libraries that were introduced, like React Query and Apollo Client, and these kind of libraries which helped on managing the state of the data that we get. So that's the way how I like to keep it. So when it's data from the server, it's usually handled by those two libraries, and the rest that are user-related or user interactions, I tend to go with React Context. But I just wanted to add one more thing that I have started to use in this Vue 3 project that I'm working in. It isn't part of this list, but is something called with state machines, or a library for it is called XState, which is a new way or a different kind of way how this state management has usually been used. So just to talk shortly about it, it really helps on having a clean and maintainable code, because what state machines or the XState library does is that it removes all like the conditions or let's say business logics that we have in the JSX. So let's say, for example, a button is clicked, it'll just send an action which will then be handled by the state machine, which will transition from state to state, and it's very more secure and yeah.
So I would like to jump in on this. First, on which frameworks would you learn in the future? That's why I said in the beginning that there were interesting questions and a bit tricky. For example, when React was introduced, everyone was mentioning the virtual DOM like a great engine behind doing the magic. And now, for example, Svelte is getting quite popular to the front-end developers, but Svelte is using another sale point. It's saying that we don't have virtual DOM. So it means we understand that mostly the frameworks, at least from my understanding, are being used mostly based on the influence and how big the community grows. So I don't think there is a deep analysis in the technical side, how people decide to learn or why to learn a framework. They basically just want to know which one is the best to start learning. And just a comment, for example, especially for Redux, which was a great library for the React developers in the beginning, because it had, I think, a great context management. But this is how open source works. So basically, the React devs decided to do it on their own because they needed that feature, and probably a library is going to be dead. So, but this is how the ecosystem works. So, yeah.
Thanks, Edon. We will continue with the next category that we asked the developers. It's regarding the TypeScript. We ask, have you used TypeScript during the last year? And 53% of participants say yes. And another question was, do you like TypeScript better than JavaScript? 36% of the participants was yes, TypeScript works better than for me. Then we have 35% with I kind of like both, and the other part is with no JavaScript, it's the win. What do you think about this old debate between TypeScript versus JavaScript? Is TypeScript helpful for the developers? It's something that will keep going on or all the developers all the libraries are switching also on TypeScript. So what are your thoughts? It's the TypeScript will continue to be part of the JavaScript because I think it helps to prevent the bugs to be more faster in development. So what do you think about the TypeScript versus JavaScript?
Okay, some years ago, the web or the front-end development was considered something simple. But nowadays, considering how the browser's involved, you can do, for example, even games in the browser, in the JavaScript front-end. So first, TypeScript and JavaScript. I think everyone knows that TypeScript becomes JavaScript after the transpile process. I like that someone just decided, I think Microsoft decided to introduce TypeScript because JavaScript is not strict data language and strict type language. And this gives the possibility, especially to junior developers, to have a very much memory leaks in their coding or managing their data or whatever. It was very interesting to see that some people consider that JavaScript at some point will be like TypeScript. It was an interesting approach. I see it also happening, even though I don't think that the browser standards are discussing it for now because it would require huge changes. We can imagine how many websites are running today with pure JavaScript, and they can just deprecate it, and because it will bring the entire web down. But I think the most important thing is that every JavaScript developer should just understand that TypeScript is JavaScript. You have only some extra parts which power the object-oriented programming in TypeScript, and which is very good to know and very helpful to write clean code and to manage memory and to have better structures of models or classes, whatever. But they should just make sure that they should know JavaScript, because I think this is a side effect between JavaScript and TypeScript. When I had some situations where some front-end developers which were used to work with TypeScript were struggling to do something in JavaScript without TypeScript. So this is an issue, and I think this is the important point, just to be good at both of these, let's say, languages, even though I don't consider TypeScript a language.
Yes, maybe Freskim, can you add regarding this TypeScript? What do you think? It's something that helps developers, or do you think the senior, let's say, JavaScript developers, let's say, are more free when they work with JavaScript? But I also mean that also for the beginners, it's very, very helpful.
Yeah, I really think that senior developers maybe will have more free to write in JavaScript. Also for the beginners, JavaScript will be more easy to learn. But TypeScript, it supports when the project keeps growing in size and complexity. So when you write TypeScript, it's very easy to make the project even bigger and bigger, and also to write code that is maintainable and also useful. Every developer that has checked TypeScript code will learn very easy because it supports object-oriented programming. Also, it's more strict, especially in variables. So if you declare a variable int, you cannot then switch to something else.
Thank you. Nesar, from your perspective, I know that you have worked both firstly in JavaScript, then you continue doing the project in TypeScript. What you thought?
Yeah. As with React, with all the projects that I worked in, TypeScript was also a standard that I used, and the main benefit on how I would say is that from the TypeScript is that it helps have a consistent data types. How we can take, for example, is let's say the backend has sort of a response that it gives, and it could be like 2 or 3 fields. And what it usually happened during the projects is that they could change one of the field or add one another and something like that. And when combined TypeScript with the components, it helps very much because all you need to do is actually make changes to or get the latest interface from the data type or the response of the backend. And TypeScript in the runtime will warn you that you're using something that doesn't exist or something that is missing. Yeah, so same thing. And do I like TypeScript better than JavaScript? So yeah, it's for that case. So I very like the addition that it gives to JavaScript, because those errors is better to have it in the runtime than in production when the client just sees a blank page. And so that's the reason why I always use TypeScript. But also good way of actually for the developer experience is that, let's say, libraries that we use who are definitely typed, so have TypeScript integrated, you don't really need to go to the NPM or their GitHub and watch their documentation and such to learn their input or methods. All you need to do is kind of just look into the imports, and that will navigate you to the node modules, and you'll quickly find the method you're looking for. So that's the reason why TypeScript is also a standard for me, because it really helped in the work process. And what do I think about the future of TypeScript? There has been a debate which is to JavaScript to have TypeScript integrated, but these I think two are in conflict between each other, because the thing that makes JavaScript is that is a definitely typed it's dynamically typed language, and TypeScript isn't run on that paradigm. So what I think about the future of TypeScript is that it will be more and more integrated between the backend and the front-end communication, because in that way we have more consistent way of communicating between the two sides. And for this, something that I'm looking to experiment and try in the other projects is a library that is called TRPC. And this library actually helps on making the backend and the front-end schemas of the data all in one place. So you don't really need to manually update the interface and stuff like that. I've had experience with something similar to it, which is gRPC, which helps on generating the TypeScript from the proto files, the proto buffer. But yeah, I think its future is going to be on that side.
Let's continue with the next category, that's its deployment. We ask the developers where do they usually deploy their application, and we get the response that 34% of them usually deploy in my own server. Then we go with AWS, Netlify, Vercel, etc. And also we ask about, do they use the continuous integration or CI? And we have that 62% yes. And another question was, which CI solution have you used during the last? So we get the GitHub Action are more, let's say, popular beyond the front-end developers to use as a CI tool. And then we continue with GitLab and Bitbucket pipelines and others. Edon, it's must to use for the deployment cycle. It's good to use. I think it's good. But what your thought in your company? How do you approach the deployment? It's something that of course, the DevOps team maybe handle this, but do you, in every project, use, and regarding the, let's say, the servers or the providers, are you using cloud or are you using your own dedicated servers to deploy the applications?
Okay, so nowadays we have for sure to use continuous integration and also continuous deployment because the end user or the client wants always to see the progress on everything. So I think old generation, but probably also the new generation knows how much people struggle to deploy something previously and how easy it is nowadays. New frameworks bring also new tools. For example, especially for front-end frameworks like Vue.js, React, Angular, they are these hosting providers like Vercel, Netlify, Heroku, which basically enable every developer to deploy a site. There is no need anymore to have the advanced knowledge in the DevOps. So you can basically link your GitHub account or repository and just run the npm run command or build, so to make it alive. In our company, we use continuous integration. We use different providers. Sometimes we use AWS and S3. S3 as a bucket, just we store the static files and generate a link to and make the file public, and it works pretty good, but that requires to have some infrastructure in your end, especially for the GitLab runners, or if you decide to use the free GitLab runners, you can use them, but then you have issues in the queue because there are plenty of users using them. And sometimes we use Netlify and Vercel, especially now that Lambda from AWS introduced Node.js. These two tools became very powerful because the user or the people are able to host also some front-end and some Node.js now in the same tool. Previously, we were enforced to use Heroku in case we had Node.js backend and, for example, React or Angular on front-end because Heroku was supporting Node.js. I would recommend mostly to use like these tools, which are very easily to integrate and also very good maintained from their team. Of course, sometimes they cost, and this is also a topic when you have to decide for a tool. So I think a time ago we have also used like our own servers. We have just automated the process in the continuous integration and then just transfer the files to the server and so on. But yeah, I think it's the CI/CD is everywhere now. So.
Let's continue with the next category, that is site generator. We ask about which site generated have you used during the last year, and most of the response are that, let's say, or the half of the response are that they are not using any of, let's say, a site generator or other, and then we go with Next.js, that is 42%, Gatsby, Nuxt, and other site generator. Freskim, what do you think about the, let's say, the site generator? Do you have any experience regarding that? I know that site generators are really fast because they provide you with performance, and all the HTML and CSS is generated. So for the end user, they will get the performance, but sometimes when we have changes, maybe this process of deployment, it takes, for example, 3 to 5 minutes. Let's say when we have a Gatsby site and when we do a change on admin dashboard, it takes, let's say, 3, and sometimes it's, let's say, concern for the administrator of the site because they want. But usually when there are not a lot of changes, it's preferred to use the Gatsby or Next. But what are your thoughts about this?
I'm very happy that in Tenton, most of the time we are using Gatsby Next and Next.js. The main reason why we are using them because most of the clients are requiring to be the search engine optimization, that support search engine optimization. So, and static generators, site static generators are the tools that we use to deploy the high-quality software applications that our clients and our team can use very good code, and also they can find them very easy in Google or something else.
What is your recommendation regarding for some static site generator and, let's say, server-side rendering? When you recommend the clients, for example, we usually recommend when we have a, let's say, a landing page or a website that usually do not have a lot of updates. We go with, let's say, Gatsby because it's really, we get the performance of the static site generator. But usually when we have the sites that have dynamic changes of the content, we recommend, let's say, Next.js because it's server-side rendering.
Yes, also in Tenton we do the same approach. If it's just a landing page, we go with the Gatsby because it's very easy to develop and maintain it. Also, it's very fast. But if we need something more bigger, more complex, we go with Next or Next. It depends if you use React or Vue.js.
Thank you. Okay. The next category is the micro frontends. We asked the front-end developers, have you used the micro frontend? And we got the 57% that they used. Nesar, what do you think about the micro frontend? Are we in this initial phase of using the micro frontend, or is usually used only from the corporates like or enterprise like Netflix, Google, Facebook, or it's something that we can see in the near future to be added also in, let's say, common projects or small projects? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so micro frontends as a concept, like how it's in the backend, how its implementation is really done with microservices. If we compare it in the micro frontends from what I've seen and I had to work a little with, it isn't that easy. That it isn't very smooth to actually make these kind of micro frontends, to as we call it. So let's say we could have like one part of the application written in Vue, one part of the application written in React. That actually doesn't really bring much consistency, and when it comes to deployment and maintaining it, it really introduces a lot of edge cases. So for this, my experience, at least what I worked so far, is that when in the micro frontends, is that we have worked, for example, in the project that I'm in right now, we have split the application in 3 pieces, which is the admin panel, and then is the user interface or marketplace, as they call it, and then there is another kind of application which is called as a lib. And that inside of that lib, we actually put all the shared components, shared functionality that we have. So that is very generic. So how this kind of approach, I would say it is more of like a mono repo, but not micro frontend. But that's the way that I implemented so far, because we got to look at the other side, how feasible it is to actually maintain or scale that kind of project. And as you mentioned, when it comes to like corporate project or enterprise project that are quite big and need certain architecture, that would be the case, I guess, that micro frontends would be implemented more. But one tool that actually we're using right now that helps on this, doing this kind of splitting of applications and such, is called NX. So you can find it, their site is nx.dev, which helps a lot on reusing the components that you have in the lib library, and also it really helps you, let's say, when you change a component in the lib library, indicates you what part of the site are affected from it. So yeah, this area is something that I'm looking to actually work more on, but I guess with time it will be more smoother to work with.
Let's go to the next category, handoff tools. We ask, have you used the handoff tools when working with the designers during the last year? And yeah, we get this around of 75% that say that they use. And regarding which the tools they used, of course, the Figma get the most percent, 81%, then continue with Adobe, XD, Zeppelin, and InVision. Edon, do you think that in the near future, the part of the UI will be, let's say, easily generated from those tools, from, let's say, Figma, and the front end does not have to do the slicing or to do anything regarding the slice? So let's say that we get an AI to generate the component, but we see today that there are some tools, but usually they use the position absolute, and it's not what the front end wants. But is this in the near future that we don't need to take care about the UI part or the slicing? What do you think about this?
Actually, I have met a client, and he had a design team which was also doing the front end from Figma. So it is funny. I still don't think that, as you mentioned, there are some plugins, for example, for Figma or Adobe XD that can basically export the design in HTML. But I still don't think that we are at the point that there is a perfect format of the code or reusability or whatever. So, but I find very helpful, especially Figma, which is a web-based solution. I have seen many times the front-end team in our company arguing with the design team because they were checking the pixel perfect thing and so on. So I would say that it could happen because it's not something that is not doable. But I remember also Photoshop had this feature, maybe 2013. I was using this because I was trying to automate something and it didn't work well. So I think that it could happen, but not soon.
Let's see the future. By the way, I designed this with a Figma. This is the first time that I use Figma. Of course, the first slide or designer spot helped me to do, but then I see that it's pretty easy to use also as a developer to do some change on design. Of course, it's not allowed, but it's pretty good tool as to use the Figma.
Yeah. Probably we have to change the web development. Instead of slicing, we have to show screenshots or something like that. Yeah. That would be faster.
Okay, the next category is the SEO. And we ask the front-end developers, do you take care about the SEO? And 72% say yes, and 27% say no. And also we ask about how do they approach the subject of SEO. And we get that using SSR to render the meta tags in the head section, and let's get 44% of the response, and also using SSR to render the whole page with 36%. Nesar, do you think that it's a concern that, let's say, around of 30% do not take care about the SEO? Because it's something that for the client is the, let's say, very important SEO. What do you think, why those 30% of the participants don't like to take care about the SEO?
Yeah, probably if they get a client that is like a news portal or something like that, they'll learn it the hard way, I think. But what I would really suggest on having a really good attention to the SEO, and I understand this percentage because probably it could be that the first tool that they work with is something like React or Vue, which is sort of split into components and makes it a bit harder to actually take care of this, search engines, but I would really put more focus on it, because taking care of SEO actually helps you taking care of your code base as well, because the practices that SEO requires are using something like semantic HTMLs and certain kind of rules which will help you understand the core of the front end. So how should the HTML, how should the CSS, all of these be called, because once it's all in place, all well together, it will take care of itself, the CEO score. It could be very simple practices, like you don't really need to use multiple H1s as an instance. So if you have a main title, which is so the main focus of a page, use just one H1. Don't use multiple of them, because that will decrease the score of SEO. So once you know these kind of processes, will help in this part. But I would link it maybe with the other question as well, is that SEO in the projects that I worked with are mainly like SaaS projects, which didn't really need much SEO focus, because it wasn't getting tracked by search engines. So SEO's attention decreases a bit once you develop on that kind of stuff, but it's a very good foundation to have it in that case. But let's say with the frameworks, how I approach the SEO is, for example, if we have a landing page or something that promotes that SaaS product, we could either go with a static site generator, as was mentioned before, or with a certain CMS which has built-in tools that help on increasing the SEO score. But if that's not the case, for example, actually right now I'm working with that kind of ticket, is that we don't need the landing page to be another CMS, but we need to have it in our app that we've developed. So it's just a single page application, so how we do it in that part. So how I'm approaching it is looking for certain libraries that help on doing the meta tags or setting the meta tags dynamically for the application, because in that I guess that will be what is needed when we take it an existing project.
Yeah, one point to mention here is that it's not that only meta tags it's important for SEO. Let's say the 44% for me is concerned because you don't need SSR to generate only. Let's say if you use SSR to render the whole page, that makes sense, but using SSR only for meta SEO is not only the meta. As you mentioned, it should be a standard for front-end. They should have a tools to validate every H1, H2, H3, everything that they do. Of course, we are talking, when we are talking for SEO, it's usually for the pages that are public, and they need to get the let's say high ranking on search engine like Google and so on. So for me, this is kind of concern that they are using the SSR only for generating the meta tags.
Yep, I agree.
In the next category about the QA, we asked the front-end developer, have they performed the software test during the last year, and we got 55% yes. And another question was, who is responsible for testing in your software development team? We got the 46% for software developers and QA specialists together. Then we get the mostly software developers with 25% and only software developers with 80%. Freskim, how you handle or how you approach the QA in your teams inside the Tenton? Do the QA specialists are from the first phase of the project or from, let's say, software development cycle, or do they only include it in the, let's say, staging phase when they need to to do the testing, so they are only software tester, not the, let's say, part of the team. How you handle or how you approach in the Tenton this, the QA part?
I'm very happy that also in Tenton, for every feature that we develop, we have also QA test, so that test it before merging to master and push the changes to live. So we know that if something breaks or something else. Also, every developer, we write a unit and feature test to make sure that everything is working correctly and we don't have any unexpected results. Most of the time, we are writing unit and integration tests. We write unit tests because we want to know if a certain method is returning the response that we need, and also as we expected. But for the feature test, we want to give different variations of that feature to make sure that we determine best user experience. So if a user visits a specific page, we make sure that he has the right permission to view it or something else.
Thank you. Okay, let's continue the last slide, that it's future. We asked the front-end developers which of those trend solution will be pretty much that in the 3 years from now. And we get, let's say, Redux 25%, CSS in JS 29%, and micro front-end 11%. Edon, what do you think about the future? Let's say a final comment about the future of front-end, but also regarding this this graph that they say that CSS and JS they see as that. What do you think about this?
Okay. First, I like that Ajax doesn't have that high percentage of being dead in the future, because I had many times a discussion with the front-end engineers. Ajax is something in the core of JavaScript, so it handles the asynchronous calls that we are doing all the time by calling APIs. So I like this. I think, for example, the Redux we already mentioned. It's a library which depends on the framework, and sometimes the framework guys just decide to implement it in their own, and you have to switch it off. It is an exception in case Redux just switches the aim or whatever, but I think it is not more so popular as it was before. CSS and JS, it looks like more a responsibility to the clean code, not something that the language should stop you doing it, because that's why JSX came, where you could also add HTML in JavaScript, and it's being used from React or other frameworks as well. So I think it's a responsibility to the developers and not a restriction in the language level. I think I'm not, for now I am not good at predicting what could be that. REST API GraphQL for sure not. jQuery probably is dead, not because it doesn't work, but I think the problem that jQuery solved are already handled in different frameworks, so not so sure about this.
Thank you. Nesar, what are the final thoughts about, let's say, the whole this discussion that we have on? What is about your thoughts about the future of front-end and the framework? Who you think that continue to get more popularity and to strike between those frameworks? And what do you think regarding this graph about the next trend that will be that?
Yeah. In terms of the technology or kind of libraries, I don't think that in 3 years they will be all dead. Like the jQuery won't be used ever again or something like that, because probably a client from 5 years ago will come to you and say, could you do this and stuff like this, so you have to work with it as well. And but yeah, in terms of, I would say maybe in JavaScript, I can see something that new frameworks will be introduced and get more momentum. And as Freskim mentioned, the ones that from Svelte or other framework which I'm looking to dig in more is Solid.js, because these two frameworks introduce manipulating with the components without the need to have a virtual DOM, which is something that React solved when it was first introduced and gained its popularity on it. But I guess with JavaScript being more and more advanced, more having these kind of things built in, it will be more lightweight by default. So I guess that's my prediction for that. But also in Frontend, in Balkans overall, maybe I could give my input on that as well, is because I had a couple of groups where I was as a trainer in the Beetroot Academy, and in there we had groups or people that started with zero experience, were people like 15 years old, 25, 13 years old. All of them started from scratch, and it was quite exciting. Or it was very nice to see that they got very quick adapted into like React, working with all of them, and hopefully they'll be the part of the crew that will write the new chapter of the front-end overall.
As you mentioned regarding the Beetroot Academy, that you are a trainer,
Yeah.
what is your recommendation for the new developers that want to learn the JavaScript and front-end? Should they go pick the framework, library, or what is your recommendation? Maybe it's better to go first to learn the basic of, let's say, JavaScript, or not to jump directly to the, because they, in the road, they might have an issue to understand the core functionality of JavaScript. What do you think?
When we talk in front-end overall, so when starting from complete scratch, I would actually recommend on starting with HTML and CSS, getting the really basics of it. So writing semantic HTML, doing all those necessary small stuff, getting it right from the beginning. And after it, start small with JavaScript. Maybe it's not the easiest way to learn it, and then just get some idea how JavaScript works, and then analyze how the frameworks like React or maybe Vue. Vue, I would recommend the framework that maybe could be easier to work with, because you can find more community for it, and they'll then. So my main advice would be to more analyze more critically, so critical thinking on it. So, okay, this is JavaScript, this is how it works, it isn't the best, why it isn't, and this kind of stuff. And then look at the frameworks and how these kind of things solve it, how easier it makes my job and this kind of thing. So, yeah.
Thank you. The Freskim, what are your thoughts about the future of front-end in our region?
Well, I really think that React and Vue will grow and have a bright future. But also I will mention also that Alpine.js is very easy to learn and easy to use it. Maybe Nesar has used it. Alpine.js is very useful nowadays. It's very popular nowadays, but it's not that big that is React or Vue. So for small projects, maybe landing pages or something, you can use also Alpine.js. That is very good.
Thank you. This was the last category to discuss. It was a pleasure to have this discussion with Edon, Nesar, and Freskim. Thank you, everybody, for being part of this panel. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
If someone from the audience has any question that needs from us to be answered, let's.
Okay, I saw in the last slide, one before last slide, for the software testing, that my question it is for what kind of testing did you ask? Because I saw that you asked, did you do some testing?
We ask if they do testing in general, and one of the graph was what kind of testing. Do they do unit testing, integration, end-to-end testing? And As I remember, the most of the response was that they are using the, let's say, unit testing first, then go with integration test and end-to-end testing. So usually the developer or the front end are more, let's say, want to create or to write tests about the end-to-end testing, because we have in the front end just another platform that helps you to create the testing. But mostly what we want to ask the front end if they do that like a practice, because usually it's recommended an QA specialist to be part of the team when they write the test. And also the best approach in this case, I think, is if they work together, the developers and the QA. It's not the idea to get the finger point who is the fault of this bug, but together to predict and to predict the bugs before they happen in production. Anyone else? Okay, thank you everybody for being part of this panel. You can go in kutia.net and you will find the report. Also, you will find the comments from topic specialists in different niche, so you can go and download for more details about it. Thank you everybody.